Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Allen. I'm joined by my podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. Played for many years for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings, and this is the Laidlaw and Allen Report, which comes to you twice a week, and we talk all things hockey, even though there hasn't been a lot of hockey going on as we enter the second month of the pandemic. And Tom, there's just a little bit of hockey news that's going on. And one of the things I've noticed is there's been, some discussion coming out of Arizona about that the Coyotes are really going to put on a press to try to sign Taylor Hall. And I think a lot of us thought, well, there's really no chance that you get this close to unrestricted free agency. You might as well explore it. Plus, the Coyotes are not a premium contender. They seem to be better than they were before, but it's not like you're going to the one of the original six or a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Boston Bruins, teams that are been identified as primary contenders. And what I wanted to ask you about is, as a player, what goes in, especially now, like in the old days, it was all about just trying to get to a contender, but they're so hard now to identify in the salary cap era. It seems to me we've sort of moved to other factors. So, try to put yourself in Taylor Hall's shoes and, what would he be looking at? What could make it enticing for him to stay in Arizona? Or is there nothing the Coyotes can do in your mind that'll alter his?
No, that's a good question. So obviously it's changed over time, right? Like you said, back, when I played, it was 21 teams. And your preference was to get to a contender because really salary wise, we didn't make a whole lot of money. So those kind of factors like salary, everything weren't relevant. But with Taylor Hall's case, I would assume that his agent and he already have a pretty good handle on, they really can't be talking to other teams, but an agent who has multiple clients has to talk to other teams, and inevitably somebody will, the conversation of Taylor Hall will come up. So they have a pretty good handle on the teams that have shown some interest and that interest level. For me, if I'm a player right now, I'm saying, okay, where do I fit into this organization? Do they view me as a top line player? Am I viewed as a second line player? Am I viewed as a captain on this team? If I'm also looking at, then listen, you're going to sign like a $10 million contract. The state tax issues are important too. That's why Steven Stamkos, for instance, signed for less down in Tampa because Florida has no state tax there. So all those kind of financial issues go into it. Do I believe in the coaching staff? Do I believe that the general manager is pushing this team in the right direction? All those questions, and the lifestyle that you live out there, like. To me, I would love to live out in Arizona. I love living in LA. I love playing for the New York Rangers. But the one thing when I got out to LA was, I think I've told the story where first Christmas I was there where we'd rented a home with a hot tub in the backyard. And there I was sitting having a cocktail in a hot tub on Christmas Eve. So I realized, well, it's a bad place to play hockey. So I think there's a lot of factors. And again, everybody's different. Some guys wouldn't want to be in a place like Arizona. They want to be a Canadian city. They want to be in Edmonton. More of a hockey, the cold weather wouldn't bother them necessarily. So everybody's different. I'm with you though. I don't know why Taylor Hall would want to sign now when he's gotten this close to total free agency. But the other side of it is, like, he had that, what was that, 2 years ago where he won MVP of the league, but since then he really hasn't been lighting it up. So maybe he doesn't feel like there's that great of a market out there for him. I think he's a fantastic player, but he hasn't played that great lately either. So a lot of different factors, and I still would be surprised if he did sign prior to becoming an unrestricted free agent.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it influences his thinking that, he was in a real hockey market in Edmonton? Say what you want. I mean, they haven't made they've had trouble making the playoffs for the last decade. Yep. But, it's a hockey town. That's the sport is big in Edmonton. So he goes to New Jersey where, they're overshadowed by the Rangers and really have, even with the success the Devils have had through the years, has not really, created the kind of buzz that they had hoped they would in the market. So, it's not I don't think we can claim New Jersey as a hockey hotbed. Right. So he's come out of there and they didn't have a lot of team success. Now he's going to Arizona, where again he has not been. The Coyotes have not been a team that's regularly been in the playoffs. Right. They're still trying to establish identity. He has not had much postseason. And I don't know. Does that weigh more heavily, do you think, on him than a guy that's been in the playoffs quite a bit and knows how hard it is to win a championship? Does he just want to make sure he gets to the team that he knows is going to be in the playoffs most years?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to tell. You mentioned that from the top when you start talking. Who would have thought? St. Louis, when they won last year, was in last place halfway through the year. So who would have picked them to win the Stanley Cup? You can't tell. Like somebody now says, "I'm going to go to that team because I want to win the Stanley Cup." Well, that's great, but there's no guarantee it's going to happen. To your point, for me, I just like everybody. A player of that, I think any player that makes it to the National Hockey League, and certainly a player like Taylor Hall. He's concerned with his legacy too, right? He's thinking down the road. When I retire from the game in 10 years or wherever that is, I want to know that I want people to know. I want to know myself that I've done something with my career. And a big piece of that when you talk to people is, I go to events, like with Glenn Anderson there now with the Rangers stuff. He's won with 6 Stanley Cups, so he is known as that winner. The guys that can be great players but don't win Stanley Cups. They're still great players, but they just aren't to that level that the other guys are that won multiple cups. So that's a part of it to go someplace. But he now that he's been in Arizona, maybe he sees the way that organization is run. He's talked to the general manager enough. He's talked to the coach enough that he believes that yes, we haven't won it yet. We've struggled, but he believes we're in the right heading in the right direction. That's got to be his call. He's had an up close and personal look at it now. So, but. Then you think to yourself too, okay, so who do we think the contenders are? The Boston, the St. Louis, Tampa, Washington. Okay, but if I go to those places, am I as big a deal in those lineups as I would be in Arizona? Maybe do I want to play behind Alex Ovechkin? I want to be the guy. I don't know what his mindset is.
By the way, is it fair that we sort of color top players who don't win with a different brush? Is Marcel Dion less of a player because he didn't win the Stanley Cup? Is Bill Gadsby, who's a Hall of Fame defenseman, less of a player because he wasn't on a team that won it? I've always been bothered by that. Because sometimes the way people bring that up is as if those guys were not winners. That if Marcel Dion, and what I always say is Marcel Dion played for the Montreal Canadiens in the 70s, would they have not won because he was on the team? Well, of course not. They would have, if you take out Guy Lafleur and put in Marcel Dion, would they not have won? I think they would have won.
Yeah, they would have won. Yeah, no question. And plus, some of the guys, the third or fourth line guys that are on multiple Stanley Cup winning teams, no disrespect to them, but that doesn't mean that they were the reason that they won cups, right? They were a part of it, but somebody else could have filled that role too. So, I agree with you totally. It's unfortunate, but I do know, like from playing, man, it's just it's something special. Like you go through the 82 game grind, but the playoffs are something different. Like you really have those memories of the playoff series. Like I remember my first year, playing the LA Kings in the first round of the brawls we had, and beating them, and then going and beating the St. Louis Blues, and then facing the New York Islanders where they were winning the cup. So that year was really special. It's like you think back about it, it's just those memories. That's I mean, there's money involved, obviously, but that's just the Stanley Cup. The memories of playing for the Stanley Cup is really, really pretty special.
Well, Tom, let's do a little role playing here. I'll be John Chaika.
Yes.
You be Taylor Hall.
Okay.
And, Taylor, we're in the midst of this pandemic, and we talked before about how we weren't even going to address this till after the season. But, the price of poker has changed, Taylor. Coming out of this pandemic, we're not sure how many people are going to come to our arenas. We're not sure what our corporate sponsors list is going to look like. A lot of businesses are hurting, and every team in the league may be experiencing some kind of economic downfall or downgrade. And it's possible, and I don't really know whether it will or it won't, that we may be looking in a dip over the next 2 years of the salary cap. And a lot of teams are going to be in trouble you don't know what your free agent marketplace is going to look like when you get there, because we're all looking for trouble. So what about if you just sign for us? We can give you 8 years. We'll give you the money you would get, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And not only are we paying you in real dollars that you would get, we'll pay you in sunshine as well. You'll know it's a lot nicer out here in the winter. And we're a team on the rise. And I know you like our coach, Rick Tocchet. Who doesn't like Rick Tocchet? This is a guy that gets the most out of his teams. And you look at what he's done with our team. What are you going to get elsewhere? You're getting a lot of unpredictability, because you don't know which teams are going to win the Stanley Cup, and you don't know what the market's going to look like because of this crazy pandemic.
Well, John, what is your plan for the future then? I'm a driven, motivated athlete, and yes, money is important to me, but I want to know that I'm going to have a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. We here haven't really gotten close to it. So what is your plan to get us in that position where we can win a cup?
Well, you've been here long enough, Taylor, to see that, we have put together a pretty solid defensive team, and Tocchet does a really good job of making us competitive. Where we've been lacking is in offense. And since you come here, we've been a little bit better, but granted, we have not been where we want to be. But we've got a good collection of younger players here that I think Clayton Keller at some point is going to produce at a higher level than he is now. I mean, he's still a very young man, Taylor. You know that. You know what it's like when you're young and try to make your way here. And then suddenly sort of it comes together as you sort of, figure it all out. And I think if you look at my history, I've made this team better. And, I'm a guy that's very aggressive, other than Jim Rutherford. And, is there anyone who makes more trades than I do? I mean, I'm always pulling the levers trying to make this team better. And my goal, my objective is to make this team better offensively. I think defensively we're there. Okay. And I think that. I mean, I think that Tocchet can work with the ingredients we have here.
Now, are you willing to give me a full no-move clause?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, you can be the face, Taylor, of this franchise. Right. Like, you can be the guy. There won't be anybody else. This will be your team. You can take this team over. Remember when Shane Doan was here? Yep. This was his team, and I think you'll be in that position as long as you produce and be the player you were in your MVP. I don't think there'll be any debate about who the king of the program will be. It will be you, Taylor.
So no disrespect to you, John. You've been great to me here, and I like what you're doing. But you mentioned Jim Rutherford. Jim Rutherford's got a long track record. He won Stanley Cups. He's shown that he knows what he's doing. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful to you, but you haven't done that yet.
Well, I agree with that, and I would never try to compare myself to Jim Rutherford, who has not only won Stanley Cups, but he's won them with 2 different organizations, which in itself just proves how valuable. My only comparison was, what makes Jim Rutherford great, I think, in my opinion, is how aggressive he is. He leaves no stone unturned. Like, he's always looking to better his team every minute of every day, and that's how I am.
Right. No, I agree.
I'm always looking to improve my team. And we look now, it appears we have ownership that's willing. You look at where we are in the salary cap list, and we're right up there. We're not near the bottom anymore. He gave the okay to bring you in now, and we're going to be there, and we're going to pay to get the talent we need.
So, and how much do you think? How much are you thinking that you want to pay me per year?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to want to leave something for someone else, but I don't know. I think we got to get you in the $8.5–9 million range.
Oh my God, I'm only an $8.5 or $9 million a year guy.
Well, do you think people are going to get $10 million after the pandemic ends?
Well, yeah, because I think the escrow system is going to take care of that. It won't be they'll sign for the same contracts they were before.
Well, I think if you look at the landscape and you look at what's going on in Chicago right now, and the difficulty that having a pair of $10 million players in Chicago has had on that team, and to be honest with you, they're not the problem. They're still performing at the level. But when you have players making that kind of money, you can make no mistakes anywhere else. Yeah. And, they have an aging group. And I would like to just, have you contribute to our success by leaving some money so that I can go out and improve this team. If we get too much money at the top, we just won't be able to add the pieces we need.
All right. So because of that uncertainty, what if I said to you that, listen, I believe in myself enough, I'll sign for 4 years for $9 million a year?
I'd be willing to look at that. And we can revisit. It's be a good test drive for you. You can see if you like it here. Maybe this is the lifestyle you wanted and really not known it. And you'll be able to move out here and get settled, get a house, find the right country club,
Sure.
and really get acclimated. And meanwhile, I think that could work for both sides. I would be happy to do that. But, I just assumed you would want the long-term security.
Well, see, I think obviously with the pandemic, it's changed things, but the revenues have continued to grow over the National Hockey League. It'll be interesting to see what happens now. But I believe in myself enough, and I believe that in time the revenues will get back where they were and continue to grow. And I see these guys sign these long-term contracts. Even Connor McDavid, is he going to regret that down the road, thinking that maybe he's worth more than that, halfway through the contract? So I'd be willing to look at the 4-year option. Then yeah, we get to prove, okay, can you have this team become a winner? If that's the case, then we sign again. If not, then move on someplace else.
Well, yeah, and you'll still be relatively in your prime. I mean, players are staying longer.
Yep.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I also believe that the fans will come back. My concern will be in the short term.
Yep.
I just wonder if we just announce, in July that we think we have this under control. Is everyone going to be willing to slide into church pews and to go to movie theaters and to go inside an arena with 20,000 people?
Well, plus you think about all the unemployment, all the companies lost revenue, but they're not buying tickets anymore and all that.
Yeah, it's all the above. So I think in the short term, we're looking. I think it's going to impact free agents of the next couple of years. And, within a couple of years, certainly we'll be back to normal. I believe that. And, there's going to be no less enthusiasm for sports. I just think a lot of people are going to say, I think I'll watch on television.
Right. I've got one last request. Can you get a psychiatrist for Phil Kessel and figure out his mind so we can get him straight away?
Well, I think we've all tried to figure out Phil Kessel. I
loved him in Pittsburgh, but he's just not doing it right now. So that's my last request.
No, he really hasn't. But anyway, Taylor, I'm glad we had this talk, and let's finalize it tomorrow. Nice.
See, I seriously, I think to myself, like with Connor McDavid, listen, he's making $12.5 million a year, so he's never going to complain about that. But set aside the pandemic, the revenues continue to rise. Him signing that 8-year contract in Edmonton, I really think that somewhere down the road, if he continues to be that dynamic of a player, he may be saying to himself, geez, I sold myself short. I should have signed for 5 years or 4 years. Now when I was back at the table again, I maybe could have got $15 million. No.
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I do believe, that I'm not sure, when I was John Chaika, I would have said this, but every team, in my opinion, can afford 2 or 3 top players.
Yeah.
But you've got to be careful and have no poor signings.
You're going to be drafting players. You got to have a developmental.
Yeah. I mean, there almost has to be a formula for every roster where, you're going to always have, I don't know whether the number is 7 or 6 or 8 entry-level players who come in and contribute. Right. And, I think the Penguins have done that remarkably well in recent years to stay on top. They've found guys, especially in the college ranks, who have been able to step in and exceed expectations.
But it is too, Kevin. We've touched on this before, and I use this word so much, but it's now the culture of the team that you have. So these young kids are coming into an organization where they're taught how to win. They're taught how to be professionals. It just seems like there's certain places like Pittsburgh that, look at what Tampa's doing now. They're constantly bringing in great young players. It's great. Yes, you have to draft properly and make sure that you pick the right players, but it's also teaching them how to become pros. So I just, that's part of the issue. That's been part of the issue in Edmonton. And it's something that really hasn't happened yet in Phoenix. They may be heading in that direction, but they haven't fully got there. That's right. Edmonton, that's to me and I watched and I'm kind of amazed there because of the people running the organization Although, Kenny Holland's there now, and he's mastered that. I thought he mastered that in Detroit for sure. So I think things will turn around for him. But that's always kind of amazed me that they couldn't get that figured out in Edmonton. It's great, have all these first overall draft picks, but then it just never works because they have no culture there. So.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. And then Edmonton, I think when they got Lucic, they thought it was going to help a little bit in that regard as well. Not only would he be sort of a protector because of his toughness, that he would show him how to be a pro. Because say what you want about his lack of production, and he has not been the same player he was in Boston since the trade, and he was really starting to decline even in Boston. But he's always been a pro's pro. Like, he comes to work every day and knows what he's supposed to do. And I think they thought that was going to sort of rub off, and it really didn't happen. While we're on this this sort of theme of winning cultures and being part of a winner, I want to ask you this question. And I think it's not as easy to answer as people would think about in first blush. Would you, especially when you first came up, would you have preferred to be a valuable player, a number 4 defenseman on a team where you were a key contributor on a team that didn't win the Stanley Cup, or a guy who was in and out of the lineup on a Stanley Cup champion? And, when you did play, it was just a handful of minutes, and you really were not a performer that they looked to be a difference.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Would I have gotten the feeling that, although my first year, or maybe even into my second year a little bit, they really counted on me? They knew I was going to be a player down the road.
Well, I think that let's just say it's a hard read,
right?
Like, you don't know. You're a guy like, maybe you're going to make the NHL and maybe you're not.
But on another team, I'm on the team. I'm in the NHL.
You're in the lineup. You're playing top 4 minutes. You're playing 18 minutes a game. If you're on that team.
If I was a first overall draft pick or a high draft pick, and I had and all these expectations around me that I was going to be this fantastic player, I still go to that Stanley Cup winner because I knew that I had the talent to be more. For me, coming up as a 6th round draft pick, I just wanted to be in the National Hockey League. That was my mindset there. I wanted to play in the NHL. I really wasn't even looking at the Rangers, whether they were a contender or not. It was more, I want to play in the NHL. Now, once you get into the NHL and you're established, now you say, okay, now I'm a player. I want to win. But that's a good question though. When, because you think, I got to tell you though, most times I think most players, the vast majority of players would say, I just want to be in the NHL right now. I've dreamed all my life of getting there. I just want to play. Now, again, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, those are the guys that have these, those generational, tags attached to them. Maybe it's a little bit different with them. But then look at Connor McDavid. I mean, geez, he's in Edmonton, and it just hasn't happened for them yet. I mean, look, it's almost like a waste of his first, was he in his 4th year of his career? It's almost a little bit of a waste almost to have a player that great that doesn't even get the chance to play in the playoffs. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a little more difficult too than people realize. I think, I'm not sure that honesty is the best policy when you ask a active player that question.
Yeah, totally.
Because, but I do think that a lot of, because it's thought upon, well, you're playing for the emblem on your chest, not the name on the back. But, if you're coming up and you're a free agent signee, or, I mean, you're just, like you said, you're just happy to get in the league. And I think it's a little more complicated than we want to make it.
Yeah.
You just think, for example, of, I do think there's some confusion too with players who, if you're playing for a bottom level team, and you're playing those 18 minutes, you convince yourself, well, I can play in the league. I can play for any team.
Oh, yeah.
But is that really true? I think it's not in some cases.
Right.
I think that the, especially, let's go back to our good friend Don Waddell when he had the Atlanta Thrashers. Yeah. And, did he have players on that team that really didn't perform well early on? Did he have players on that team that really probably didn't fit in anywhere else? I think the answer of that is yes.
Yeah. And I guess I can say that I feel comfortable saying this. And I don't really mean it as a slight, because I played. I'll say it though that professional athletes in general are probably some of the most insecure people on the planet, right? I mean, it's like they put on this brave face, but it's funny. You talk to like fighters, for instance. You talk to them after the game is done. Some of the guys that I played against who were great fighters, or even guys that I watched later on that were fighters. You looked at them and thought, "Geez, those guys really enjoy fighting." Like they're confident, they love to fight, and then you talk to them after, and they go, "God, I hated fighting." Like they hated it. They were losing. They're didn't sleep the night before. All those kinds of things happening. I just think it's again when you're. I won't mention his name because I don't think it's fair. But I was at an event recently and having a conversation with a player that had played after me, and talking about some of the. Some of the things like this that you didn't ever want to admit as an athlete, that you were maybe afraid out there, that you doubted yourself. You could never let anybody know that, right? So, but now after the game, we kind of get together, we kind of laugh about it, because we're all all had some time in our career, or at some point, or maybe it lasted for a long time with guys where they really doubted themselves. So it's that dream of playing in the NHL and just wanting to stay there in most cases. Then there's those unique players that are the stars that seem to, take that confidence to it. And it's a real confidence they have, and they take it to a different level. So it is interesting, talking to guys after the game about how they talk about things as opposed to how you viewed them when they were playing the game.
Well, it is interesting. I've done books with athletes, and I did Stu Grimson's book, and he, the tone of the book is that he, initially was a reluctant fighter. Now, saying all that, he grew into the role. He started to intellectualize the role, and still believes it has a place in the game. Certainly didn't think that the fighting didn't belong. He just was able to sort of figure out and make peace with the idea of what it was, but not everyone did. And he talked about that some people just shouldn't have been involved because they couldn't, come to peace with it. And then there's a player, I've done 2 books with Jeremy Roenick. And one of the things that I remember from the book process, and it's in the book, is that he measured himself against Mike Modano. That was like a rivalry for him. They were both fast, dynamic players who came up at the same time, played in the World Juniors together. They were goal scorers. They were entertaining. They were fun. And he liked to always believe that, he was there and he was a step better or a little better or on par with him. But when it was over, he basically said, Modano won. Modano was a little bit better. And a little bit is probably accurate. I mean, they both were around the same goal scoring, but I was just a little bit ahead of him.
Jared had a little bit of an edge to him too, though, right? I love both players, but kind of different in some ways, right? I mean, JR get that nastiness to him.
Yes, he did. And maybe Madonna was just a little bit more dynamic. It was kind of a trade-off. But Jeremy didn't get that cup. Mike did.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. JR never won a cup.
Pardon me?
JR did not win a cup. That's right.
Yeah, he didn't get one.
No.
But Mike did.
Yeah.
So it's just little things. But I bring that up only because you just brought up that once people get removed from the game, like he never would have thought that while he was playing.
That's right.
But JR is can be very honest in his analysis of his career now.
Right.
So
have you spoken to him since you got let go from him?
One text. So I don't know how he's doing. I had the impression that he feels like he's going to land on his feet in the one text we shared. But I don't know what that is. But he'll be fine. He owns a golf course. I'm sure he's playing a lot of golf.
I didn't know that he owns a golf course.
He does in Massachusetts. Wow. Yeah, unless he has sold it in the last year. I mean, that's entirely possible.
Right.
But maybe I missed the sale of that.
Here's a really important question I have for you too. I've had so much time on my hands. I always wanted to ask you the best food. Which city has the best food in the press room in the National Hockey League?
Well, I mean, you got to look at it from a historic perspective. right now, I love to go to Chicago because it's they actually serve like a meal between periods too.
Oh.
Like there's a pregame meal, and a lot of the people in the media don't even participate in the pregame meal because a lot of us have a lot of things to write about. So between periods, they serve you food in the press box, and it's always quite good. I mean, it's like some sort of pasta or a nice salad, and it's kind of fun, particularly during the playoffs when everybody kind of steps it up. But with regard to the playoffs historically, like Calgary used to have a great feast as well. But what I always remember was in the old Montreal Forum, they had a very small press box, but they had tablecloths and things, and they still do in the modern press box. And you go in there and you have a very nice meal. Like it's sort of part of the ambiance of playoffs in Montreal. Right. Is you have this really nice kind of press meal.
What do you think the logic is there? Do you think they really want to treat the press great so they don't write bad articles about them? Or is it just
I think it was just being polite, to be honest. Now fewer and fewer people do that now, and it used to always be free, and now it's I live in Detroit. When you go down to Little Caesars, you pay $11.
Really?
Yeah, for your meal. And part of that meal is Little Caesars pizza, which I always thought was kind of fun. Like that's always, they always have a couple of entrees, and then
you pay $11 and you go in. That's kind of a buffet. You go in.
You go in and there's two chefs standing behind, and they give me the the stroganoff and whatever, and then you go down and at the very end, there's a Little Caesars pizza that you can sort of top your meal off in. So, they don't not much that the new Tom Laidlaw, would eat. The salad for sure.
Yeah.
But and occasionally they have fish, which I believe you would eat. I've seen salmon there as well, and I know that you're big on that. But boy, did Brad Smith call you out on you're eating farm raised salmon?
Yeah, he did. Yes, that was a little bit of a dig there, right?
Well, we don't even eat farm raised salmon.
No, I get mine's Atlantic salmon, I believe. It's from Costco. It's frozen, nice frozen.
Well, you gotta check the labels on that. You don't want to. I can't believe I'm saying this to a guy like you, but my wife is very careful about that. We don't use anything farm raised, and you got to make sure you're wild caught.
No, yeah, it is. No, mine's Atlantic salmon. I'm most positive it is. Yeah, okay. But somebody did give me a hard time about Atlantic salmon. I guess it's got more chemicals. Well, I should be having Pacific salmon, is what I'm told. So
yeah,
what's that?
Well, there's people who know a lot about it that I'm sure could tell you. But yeah, I wanted to actually split into Brad because I know him. I used to sit by him, and he'll remember this at the Joe Louis Arena a lot. Yeah. So I'm going to get in on it. If he's coming up with fresh salmon, I want to get in on that.
Yeah, I saw him getting interviewed the other day there. I don't think he's been eating too much salmon by the looks of things. I mean, I love the guy to death, but it wasn't the salmon he's been eating.
Oh, man, now you're digging at him again. Our president makes it acceptable now to just, to ridicule people.
They put him and Tortorella together, John Tortorella. The press conferences are classics.
Yeah, no, that would be. Well, as usual, we've gone over, man. This time, we talk all the time about how quickly a half hour goes, but it's hard to believe. But during this pandemic time, I think it's gone even faster.
Oh, I know. Yeah, chatting away. Yeah.
Anyway, I hope all of you have enjoyed this 30 minutes of hockey talk and salmon. And we still got things that we got to get to. There's something that Tom and I have talked about. I want to hear from Tom, and I want him to think about this. The biggest game that he's ever played in. Sure. And we're going to get to that. So maybe let's try to make that the first thing on the agenda on Wednesday. So thanks for joining us on Laidlaw and Allen. I'm Allen. He's Laidlaw.
Perfect. I'll give you a hint, guys. I hate Kenny Morrow. Talk to you on Wednesday.